Okay, let's go. Hello, everybody. Happy Monday and welcome to today's bonus training on pricing your products, how to get your prices right, especially how to get your prices right in such a way that it adds value to your clients. So before I start, I'm going to introduce myself. My name's Carl Alexander. As most of you know, I am the ambassador for Ultrastrand. And today I am talking about a topic where it's been questions that people have asked in relation to pricing. You know, how do I price my product right? How do I make sure that I get the best value? And I'm here to answer those questions and to actually take you through the process that we use. And I just want to say that although it's a process that we use, it can actually work in any kind of product service combination that you're doing, because it takes the two things into consideration and it works in that way to ensure that, you know, nobody's losing out. It's a win-win situation. It's a win-win scenario for yourself, and it's also a win-win situation for your client. So I'm going to pop myself in the corner as I've got quite a few slides to take you through. So let's just go. Let's see what's the best way of popping myself in the corner. So hey, here I am in the corner, and I'm just going to take you through a number of slides. Like, you might see my head bopping up and down. That's because I am focusing on the slides and not on the reflection on my face in the actual video section here. So when I've gone through everything, then I will put myself back in focus, and then you can ask any questions that you may have in relation to price and how to get it right. Okay, so let's go. Technology, let's work with technology. So the first thing that you should see on the screen is that price has been divided into two components. Now, when you look at the components, you've got the product on the one hand and you've got the service on the other. And when you're looking at the two combined together, like the product I talk about is the items that are in play, whereas the service includes things like the consultation, the installation, the maintenance, the review. So anything that you have that requires a service element into it will go into that section. Now, we're going to work with both of these each independently, and then we're going to bring it all together so that you can see how everything fits. So let's first of all start on the product. So now, in relation to the product, there's three key sort of pricing price points that you will have. So number one is the cost price, and the cost price is the cost to purchase the item from a supplier or retailer. Now, the difference between a supplier and a retailer is that a supplier is more than likely the manufacturer, or they're closest to the manufacturer. So that's pretty much the cheapest price point that you would get. The more you go towards the retailer, the more it's gone through, you know, the product essentially has changed hands. And when it changes hands, then a little bit of price gets added onto it. So you're probably going to be more at the most expensive position if you're purchasing from a retailer. So if you're looking for something where you're looking for the largest margins, then you really need to go more towards the direction of the supplier than go in the direction of the retailer, because obviously the retailer will have to add their costs on and their margins on. So by the time it gets to you, then it's, you know, you don't really have that much to play with. More than likely, when you're looking at a retailer component, then at that point, they're really ready to go straight directly to the consumer. So if you're just being a middleman in there, then it's about really what kind of service can you add, or what kind of additional value can you provide in order to then get that additional value, which will then come across to the actual consumer, the clients, and so on and so forth. The next one, which is really important, is the recommended retail price. Now, the recommended retail price is primarily more from a supplier rather than a retailer, because the supplier is giving you closest to cost. So basically they've got to the point where they've produced the product, and as close as possible, you know, taking into account their overheads and so on and so forth, to the price that it's cost them to create it, you are then getting this product. But what they want to do is almost create a a baseline so that, you know, you've got a good understanding as to how much they believe that a consumer would purchase the product for, or what they believe is fair as well. Because most times when you have like a recommended retail price, it's a fair price. It's a price saying that, well, you know, we know we've either trialed it, we've tested it, we understand what the consumers are looking for, and this is the price that we know that they'll buy it for. So that's an important price. The other thing is the market price. Now, the market price is pretty much based on supply and demand. So the market price is determined by the market. It's not what the manufacturers necessarily said, and it's also not what the retail or suppliers or what even you would say. It's basically due to supply and demand. So the more supply of a product, then the lower the price will be. The more demand of a product, the higher the price will be, especially if supply is lower than demand. So you've got all these different prices into play, but it's very important that you determine exactly where your product is going to lie and that you go in the boundaries of these things. And I'll show you exactly what I mean next. So when it comes to the product, then essentially you need to really focus on the cost price. What is the cost price of this product? Now, if the cost price is so much that, you know, that from a customer perspective, they're not likely to buy it beyond that cost price, then really it's not beneficial to you. So it's not just about being beneficial to your clients, but it's also about being beneficial to you. And if you're in a scenario where, you know, you're purchasing a product and you really can't get any value from the product itself, you've got to ask yourself the question, what am I doing? What am I doing different that's going to allow me to add value on, and value equates to money and pricing, so that when that value gets passed on to the clients, they'll understand the reasons behind why you've chosen a particular price range. Now, the other thing I want to say is do not go beyond the recommended retail price. As much as possible, do not go beyond that price. The reason being is because when you're looking at a recommended retail price, that's what the manufacturers have gone out to market and says, this is the price that we anticipate this product should be. So if a customer comes in and they find a product higher than that amount, then they're more than likely going to feel cheated. Also, if they come in and they find a product considerably cheaper, then they're going to think it's probably a counterfeit or it's not as good. Or do you know what I mean? They're going to start wondering, why is it so cheap? So don't go too low when it comes to recommended retail price, but definitely don't go beyond that price. Now, the only thing that can impact whether you do go beyond that price is the market price. 9 out of 10 times the market price is going to be lower than the recommended retail price, not higher. But there are some instances where the market price is higher, for instance, when there's scarcity. So recommended retail price is not based on market conditions, it's based on the value to the customer. Whereas the market price is based on market conditions. So if a product becomes scarce, then it may be that the market price goes up. So therefore, the value that a client is having is the fact that they can't get it anywhere else. They can only get it from you. And therefore, that drives up the market price because there's scarcity. Now, if you've got a market price which is lower than the recommended retail price, or considerably lower than recommended retail price, then you need to be able to differentiate. You need to be able to differentiate on value. So what is it extra that you are adding that is providing that value, that differentiation? Now, if you're not adding anything extra, then you've got nothing to justify why you're going above the market price. Whereas if you do have other things to add, and this all comes into place from a service perspective. So it's not just about the product itself, but it's about the service that you do in order to get that product to them. So for instance, I don't know, you purchase the product comes in with that product, they get something else, they get shampoo, conditioner. So automatically they can't just value the price of what you're providing just by the product itself, because you've added something else into the mix. So you need to be able to say what your differentiator is if the market price is considerably less than the recommended retail price. But I'll always say focus on the cost price. That's the key thing. Do not go beyond the recommended retail price, and differentiate on the market price if the market price is lower than the recommended retail price. Okay, so when it comes to calculations, you essentially got 3 different types of calculations. So the first calculation that you're looking at is the cost price. So when you look at the cost price, so you have a product that you've brought in. Now, the first thing that you can do is say, well, once I've got this product in, I'm going to sell it at the cost price itself, because my value is not in the product itself, my value is somewhere else. So where I'm getting value from a customer perspective is not from the cost price, it's from somewhere else. So you could have a product which you just price at the cost price, and then you get the value additionally from somewhere else. The other option is you go cost price plus expenses. Now this is a good one, because do not downplay your expenses. Now, if you've got an expense that's required in order to bring a product in, then you need to add that expense price onto the value of your product, because otherwise you're going to be losing every single time you bring that product in, every single time you purchase that product. So for example, if it's shipping that you're talking about, postage and packaging, if it's anything to do with custom duties, any of those things that are added on, even like VAT, those sort of things, anything that's been added on, you need to be able to retrieve that back. So it may well be that it is the product price plus the expenses, that is what you're going to sell it at. The other option, which is option 3, is you've got the cost price plus a markup, and that's a markup that you've determined by yourself. So you may say, for anything that I bring in, I'm going to add additional 10% onto that price, and that's just the value that I have, that I'm putting because I have sourced the product. So I've gone out of my way and I've sourced it. Remember, every single thing that you do has got a value, and it just depends as to what you want to put on that value. So for like I said, it may well be that just the simple fact that you've gone out of your way, you've sourced the product, you've gone for your training, for instance, because of all of those things, you're adding a specific markup. The only thing that I would say to you is do not go beyond the recommended retail price when you put the markup on. So if you purchase something for £10 and the recommended retail price is £20, do not start selling your product at £25 if you can't make a justification for that, because then you've gone beyond your retail recommended price. And the thing is that retail recommended price has been a calculated price. It's not a finger in the air kind of price. So if you're going beyond the retail recommended price, then you've got to have a reason. You've got to have a reason. The other thing that I want to say is that when you're looking at the retail recommended price, it must have enough margin in it. And you'll see why later on, why it must have enough margin, because there's no point purchasing something for £10 and the recommended retail price is £12. £2 worth of, it's because by the time you add on your expenses on something along those lines, you're probably down to nothing and you'll probably be giving it away for free. If not, you're taking a loss. So you've got to look at what is in the margins of the recommended retail price and whether that margin is enough for you to justify actually selling that product. So and this is the thing sometimes that we fail to miss out on, because we just look at it and we think, oh, I'm going to add an extra £1 on it, that's enough, or an extra £2. But you really need to look at it. Look at your recommended retail price, look at the margins, and on the offset determine, is this, without me doing anything, is this margin sufficient, yes or no? The answer is yes, then plod on, let's keep going. If the answer is no, then you need to go look for another product where it does have a recommended retail price that is sufficient for you. Okay, so now we're looking at the service sides of things. So we've looked at the product and we're going to park it for now, because we're going to come back, because we're going to be doing some calculations later on, and we need to have our head and our space open to be able to do these calculations. When it comes to the service, you need to first of all know the stages when it comes to a service. And sometimes you don't think about what these stages could be. I can take it, for instance, if I'm doing a color, for instance, there might be a consultation, the actual application of the color, the maintenance side of it, and then also the review to make sure that everything is a-okay. When it comes to the volumizers, for instance, when we do our example, we're going to be doing our example on the ultratrans volumizers so that you know and you understand. When it comes to the volumizers, there's 4 key stages that we've identified. And the first is the consultation. So that's when somebody comes in, they come in to inquire. The consultation should never be a 10-minute job. It should never be something that is rushed. We always allocate at least an hour, on average an hour, sometimes an hour and a half for the consultation process, especially if it's going to be like a lot of education that we need to provide, because before you get to a position of purchasing a product, they really need to have, they need to be empowered with education so that they know that they're going in with an informed decision, and they know that they're not just like buying it on a whim and they don't know exactly what the product does or how it's going to work for them. So it's really key that you do education, and then based on the education, they can make an informed decision. Now, if you already have not watched Consultations That Convert, I suggest that you watch Consultations That Convert, because that's really good. That really shows you the kind of different steps that you need to take and the things that you need to consider when doing a consultation. The second stage that we have is the installation, and this is the point where the client comes in and they get the systems or whatever it is installed. Now, the installation is generally probably the longest time that a client will spend with you, because the first time they've come in, you need to do a lot of moving around, adjustments. You might need to do some customization on the spot, for example, staining the base, or some, cutting and things like that, trimming or adding additional things to the volumizer or whatever product it is. So the installation is generally a lengthy period of time. When it comes to installation, it's great to be able to add value at this point in time. Sometimes people provide, especially if the installation process is longer than, say, 3 hours, they can provide lunches and things like that. So all of that has a cost attached to it. So it's understanding what the service is, what the costs are, and then you've got the maintenance side of things. And generally speaking, for example, with Autostrands, maintenance is a cycle. It's a cycle that you do on a monthly basis, and in some instances, maintenance could be a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis. But in relation to Autostrands, for instance, it is a monthly cycle, and every month your client will come in, get their volumizer re-secured, and then every third month they get it refitted. So that's a cycle. And then at the end of that cycle, you then have a review process. And sometimes you have the review process in between, like a full lengthy period of time. And that's just reviewing how everything's going, making sure that they're looking after the volumizer, making sure that there's no issues, making sure that they're comfortable. All this is time. Now, sometimes because we don't write down our stages, we don't really understand the amount of time that goes into doing something, and it's really important to be able to do so, because otherwise you're wasting money. If you're not used to stages, then I would say this is a time to start, because honestly, when you put things down in stages, you start to understand exactly how things should be priced and where the majority of your funds should go into. There's so many salons I've been into, and I'd say, well, how have you come across this figure? And it's, well, I looked at 3 or 4 different salons, and this is the price that they were quoting it for. But then I say, well, okay, but are your services different? No, well, we provide this and we provide that. I said, well, that's not necessarily like for like. You always need to look at what are the different stages that you're providing for each and every service that you're doing, and then break them down into its components so that you can then determine the hourly rate and any additional costs that are included in that segment, or in that stage rather. Hope this is making sense. Okay, so I'm going to do some calculations with you right now. Let's see how this goes. So, for example, this is an example which is based on Autostrands, and it's based on a £60 per hour rate on a 6-month product. Now, one thing that is important when you're looking at the service side of things, especially when you've got something that has got maintenance section included, the maintenance is only as good as the product. So you always need to make sure that the maintenance cycle aligns up with the product life cycle. So on average, like for instance, we will look at Autostrands as a product, and we would say on average, Autostrands would last you between 6 months to a year. Now, depending on whether you are changing the Autostrand product on a 3-monthly cycle. Now, that's a total different video, and I'm not going to cover that in this space. So I'm just going to go very basic so that I don't confuse anybody. So on this example, we are looking at ultrastrands on a 6 monthly cycle, which means that the client will change their ultrastrands every 6 months, or at least swap it every 6 months. And therefore, because it's on a 6 monthly cycle, my maintenance is also going in line with that cycle. That's very important, no matter what it is. So whether it's a hair color, if that's a 6 weekly cycle, whether it's, I don't know, hair extensions, if that's a 6 monthly cycle, whatever that is, always do it per the cycle. So however long the product's going to last for, the maintenance should also marry that as well. So in our example, we are saying that the maintenance is every single month. So therefore, we have got a monthly cycle on that level. So what I've got here is the consultation. Now, this is not about charging for consultation. No, this is about accumulating and understanding what the costs are. Because understanding what the costs are is one thing, charging for them is a total different thing. Because some people don't charge for stuff. They'd say, I don't want to charge for it, but know that that is value that you're giving away. So you need to be able to tabulate everything. So in this scenario, we've got the consultation, and because we've based it on £60 per hour, on average, a consultation is an hour, sometimes an hour and a half, but we are looking to just charge the hourly rate. So, and this is why you've got £60 here. The next is the installation, and we're looking at the installation taking between 2.5 hours, 3 hours. So we have calculated at 180 for the installation. Our maintenance is an hour and a half, so we have calculated £90 for the first two, because the maintenance for the first two is just the resecure, which means we do not take off the volumizer. The volumizer stays on the client's head, and we just pretty much retighten the volumizer. Hence, that's why it's exactly the same, and that's why it's cheaper than the third month, because in the third month here, we'll be taking the volumizer off and putting it back on again. These are basic costs. This is not including if I was going to put a color on, or I was going to put a treatment on. I would always suggest that because they are ad hoc and not necessary for the product itself, do you understand what I mean? It's not necessary for the product itself, but valuable to the clients. I will take those outside of your calculations, and they will be ad hoc. So if a client then wants to have color, then it's whatever the price of the color is. If the client then wants to have a treatment, then it's whatever the price of that treatment is at that point in time, because it's not part of the cycle. If you include it in the cycle, you'll get into all kinds of rubbish, because you're going to have to be doing one calculation for one person, another calculation for another person, and it's just going to be too complicated. So I would suggest exclude it from this calculation that you're doing, and these are only calculations that are prices that are linked directly to the product. So the product in this sense, just to recap, is ultrastrands. You can do it on any product, but I'm just using this example of ultrastrands. So the product is ultrastrand, and this is the 6 monthly cycle that we use for ultrastrands, because we have said that the product on average will last between 6 to 12 weeks to 6 months to 12 months, and we're basing it on a 6 monthly cycle. So the first few months up until the point of the review, we've calculated that total is going to be 570. So remember that 570 includes the consultation, the installation, the 2 maintenances, the 3rd takeoff and put on, and the review. And the review could be at any point. The review could just be like, split across these periods of time. Sometimes it's directly after installation, maybe 2 weeks after the installation, you do a review. Sometimes it's at the end of the 3 months, you do a review. And sometimes it's in between. But that cost is captured anyway. On the next line, what I have is, because this is a continuation of the maintenance, there's no consultation, there's no installation, but there is the standard maintenance of £90, and this will be month 5, for instance, and this is month 6. So how I've calculated is, this is month 1, so the installation, they have a month after that point, and this is month 2, this is month 3, this is month 4, this is month 5, this is month 6, and at month 6, I'm assuming it's at the end of the life cycle. Now, if the product is lasts beyond that period of time, then I will just take the maintenance points as standard, so the 90 plus the 90 plus 120, depending on what service they're doing. But this is about pricing your product in the initial stage, so that the clients get the best value and you also get the best value as well. So we've got a total here. If we add the 570 to the 180, you get 750. Now, this is your total service cost over that 6-month period. It could be less, because if your hourly rate is lower than this, so for example, if you have an hourly rate of £45, then obviously this figure is going to be lower. If your hourly rate is more than £60, then it's going to be higher than this figure. In this scenario, I think £60 is quite reasonable, and therefore we're saying over a 6-month period, including installation, this is the amount of money that we have generated from that client. So £750 generated from that client in a 6-month period. Okay, I hope that is clear. Just in case it's not clear, I'm just going to go through it again, because it's very important that you get these figures right. So, point of consultation, the value for the consultation at this point, we have said it's £60. Installation, 180. Maintenance, which is just the resecure, £90. The taking off and putting back on again is £120. It doesn't include any additional services. So if you're cutting, colouring, any of that, it doesn't include that. The review, which can happen any point within the 6-month period, we are saying it's £30 because we expect on average it will take half an hour to do. That gives us a total of 570, and then we've added 2 additional maintenance periods so that it comes to the 6 months, which is £90 each, which gives us a total of 180, and then 570 plus the 180 gives us a total of 750. So that's how I've come to the 750 price point. Okay, so now we've got the 750. How do we move from there? Now, when we're looking at the total price, this is where the calculations gets really, really tricky, and you've got to really follow me with this. And I'll repeat this as many times as I need to, just so that you get it. Now, your margin is the recommended retail price minus the cost price, okay? So margin on anything is your recommended retail price. So if they've said to you the recommended retail price is £50 and you've purchased it for £25, then your margin is £25 in this scenario. Now, the service minus your margin is equal to your residual service price. Okay, so now when we were looking before in the previous slide, this total here, 750, is your service, because everything here is service. There is no product at all incorporated in this. This is all about the service, okay? So your residual service price is the service, which is what we've calculated before, minus your margin, which is the recommended retail price minus your cost price, okay? And then your residual service price divided by your product duration equals to your monthly maintenance, okay? So this is where it gets really, really funky. So if I use the example of Ultrastrand, so we all know like a 5x7, which is the express, recommended retail price is £640. So we've said, we've gone out and we've looked at the product, we've benchmarked it against other products, the value that it provides to the customer, and all sorts of different things. We've come to a price figure where we say recommended retail price. So if you want to go out and sell the product, it should be for £640. Now, the cost price, as you all know as well, for the volumizer will cost you, as if you are an approved salon, £400 for this particular product. Now, the difference between the £400 and the 640 is £240, which is your margin. So now you've got a margin of 240. Now, what do you do with this margin? Now, not everybody does this, but we have calculated the margin in order to give you an option. And one of the options here is basically saying that we know on average, the price that it's going to cost you to install it plus your consultation comes to about £240. And that is why we have got we were able to get you the recommended retail price of £640, because the lowest that we can provide it to you to is £400. But then with the recommended retail price, you've got an additional £240 on it. So the margin is not there for you to go, oh, wow, I can just make £240 on this product. Yes, it's possible to do so, but the key reason as to why we have got that margin in is so that you can actually include your installation price, or at least a portion of your maintenance, into that figure. So when we now come on to the residual service price, you then have the 750, which is your total maintenance, including your consultation and your installation. Take away the margin, which is a 240, which will give you £510. Now, when you're looking at £510, now this is now what we call your residual service price. What you can do with the residual service price is, if you divided that by 6, it will give you an average of £85 per month that your client will need to spend on maintenance. And now the beauty about this £85 per month is that it really doesn't matter whether they're having it taken off or put back on again, or they're just having it retightened, they pay the same amount of money. That is beneficial, and this has been trialed and tested with clients, and we know that they are far more comfortable with paying the same price and knowing what they're paying on a monthly basis than walking into a location and going, this month it's going to be £80, next month it's going to be £150, the month after it's going to be £300. They don't know what price it's going to be. So if they're very clear as to what the price is, then it becomes much more easier for them. And, and having the same price, regardless of the service, whether it's going to be, take off and put on, or whether it's going to be just a standard resecure, the more closer you can get to that, the much more value you're providing to your client, because the more comfortable they're going to feel. And also the more likelihood that they're going to turn up for their appointments, because they know once it's packaged in a way to say, okay, for the next 6 months, every single time you come, it's going to be £85 per month. And after that period of time, we'll review it. Or after that period of time, it then goes up to £90 per month, and then £120 if you're taking it off and putting it back on again. So you've got various options in which you can use that price. But one of the things that I want to say is that once you've got these price points in here, then you can start to do various types of calculations. But these price points are important. So understanding, number one, what's the margin? You've got to understand the margin. Number two, well, what is my residual service price, which is your service, take away the margin. Okay, so the service price, which was 750, which is what we calculated, take away the 240, which is the margin, gives us our residual service price. And the other thing is, with my residual service price, if I divide that by the number of times that they need to come in, what then is that going to equate to from a maintenance perspective? Okay, so now you've got these figures, you can start to look to see, well, okay, you know your client base, so you know on average what your clients are prepared to pay for, you know what segment they're in, and then you know the best way in which to package it. And that's what I'm going to be talking about now. Okay, so this is the final stage that we're in. So, we've been doing really well. I know I've been throwing some figures at you, and it's important to be able to grasp those figures as well, because, when we work with figures, we start to understand the best way in which to provide value to a client. So I've got 3 specific options when we're looking at pricing options, 3 specific options here based on the calculations that we've done before. So all we're going to do is plug some figures into the specific formulas. So the first one is what I call total front loading. Now, total front loading is where you put everything into the purchase price for the product. It's not the purchase price of the product, but it is where you front load all the things, including your maintenance, including the margins and the cost price, and you put all of that into the purchase price. So when the client comes in to purchase, say, the product, whether it's ultra strands of the product, or whether it's they're doing a balayage or whatever, you've incorporated everything in there. Now, in this scenario, to calculate that front loading price, you have the cost price plus the margin plus the residual service price. So in this scenario, the cost price is £400 plus the margin, which is 240, plus the residual service price, which is 510, which gives you a total of 1,150. Now, if you look at that figure, 1,150 you might look at it and go, oh my God, that's quite a lot of money. But just bear in mind, if you have a customer and they walk through the door and you say to them, okay, every 6 months, you can have a new volumizer. All your maintenance is included in it. The installation price is included in it. The price to you is £1,150, and that's it. You know, so from that perspective, they know that if they purchase a new volumizer, then this is what they'll pay for 6 months. Now, if the volumizer is going to last a year, for instance, then obviously the figure is going to be different because you're going to add 6 months more worth of maintenance. But as on this calculation that we've done it based on 6 months, but we front loaded everything. Now, if you've got a client base that pretty much pays this amount of money, then that kind of front load is perfectly fine. But on the other hand, if you've got clients where you know, looking at that amount, you're thinking, oh, my clients will never pay that. It doesn't matter how much maintenance you've got in, then maybe the front loading option is not the best option, which is when we've now got another option, which is called partial front loading. And what partial front loading is that you front load as much as possible, and then the rest then goes into your maintenance. And this is where you can, what I would suggest, if you're front loaded, at the very, very least, front load up until the value of the recommended retail price. And because when you do that, you've got the backing of everything, because there's nowhere they're going to go where they're really going to get it cheaper. So, and if you're front loading up until the recommended retail price, then you have, in this scenario, you have got the cost price is £400 plus your margin is 240, which gives you a recommended retail price of 640. Now, if you have a recommended retail price of 640, this is what we're saying. So we're saying that the product, so when I say we, Ultrastrand says, if you purchase the product off the shelf, it's going to cost you 640. Now, if a client comes to you and you say to them, the recommended retail price is 640, but that's going to also include your installation and the consultation. Now, this to a client is 100% value. This is 100% value, hands down, because they know that if they purchased it anywhere else, they would have to purchase the product plus have the installation on top of them. So when you front load, so you're front loading up until the recommended retail price, and then the residual price is what you have as the maintenance. At that point, you can then go, well, then for the first 6 months, it's £85 per month, or whatever that residual price is, divided by the amount of months of maintenance you're talking about. Then that will give you an average residual price. The other thing that you can do, if you don't want to include the maintenance as part of your overall package, you can say, okay, you know, this is the price for the product plus the install, and then the maintenance price is based on the hourly rate. So you've got £60 per hour, depending on whether we're doing a resecure or we're doing a take off and put back on again. And that also works really well. But the key thing that you've got there is that you've been able to front load up until the installation price, and they're having so much more value because from a recommended retail price, they've literally almost saved themselves £240 because you've included that in the price of the actual product. I hope that makes sense and I haven't gone and confused you, but I'm going to go through it all again just so that it's crystal clear. But the final one is backloading. Now, backloading I don't really recommend. The reason why backloading I don't recommend is because although it is the cheapest cost, because then you are saying, okay, I've purchased it at this, you know, at £400, so I'm going to sell it to my customer at £400, but then I'm going to charge them on top for the installation. So I'm going to charge them £250 for the installation, and then after that I'm going to charge them maintenance price, because the reason why it's not one of my best options is because it kind of like doesn't say value, because every single thing that the customer is paying for, they are seeing that, well, actually, I'm entitled to this because I've paid for that, I've paid for this, and I've paid for this. So there's no real value that they're seeing. On top of that, you're kind of like doing yourself a disservice, because you are selling it to your client cheaper than the recommended retail price. And when you sell it to your client cheaper than the recommended retail price, then it's a disservice to you, because what you are doing is you're devaluing the product itself. So you're devaluing the product itself, even though when you go to option 2, where you talk about partial front loading, you may say to me, well, there's no difference because it's exactly the same amount of money. It's all about perception. It's all about the way people see things. So if somebody looks at something and says it's £640, but I'm going to do installation for you free, then you've just banked a lot of value. You've banked a lot of value in the bank, because people are like, wow, that location, they're awesome. As opposed to where you say, okay, the product is £400, because what they would look at is the expectation drops. The expectation drops because the client will look at, well, I've paid full value for the product, but actually they haven't paid full value for the product, because full value for the product is 640, not 400. But when they look at, I've paid full value for the product at 400, then it's like I've paid full value for the installation at 240. You're looking at a total different customer to when you've got a customer that says, I've paid full value for the product at 640, but look, I've got value for the service because I haven't actually paid for my installation. It's totally different. The only way in which I would backload is if you've I would backload if you are doing it more in a promotional method, so providing a promotional method. The other way, if you are going to backload, is if you had let's see, they had already purchased a product first time, so they purchased the first volumizer, and then this is now their second volumizer. That's a way in which you can backload, because they already know what the value of the installation is, and they're paying that on a continuous basis as part of the maintenance. So that's the only other way in which I would backload. But I wouldn't suggest backloading if you are, they've come for the first time and they're providing, and you're trying to provide a service, because you're just doing yourself a disservice. You're not showing, you've got no room for value add at all. And thirdly, it's not necessary. Those three things. Now, if market price came into play, then that's a different story, because then you're looking at, from a market perspective, what does the market dictate that this price should be? Then you've got different options, but in that scenario, still you would have to display value. So you have to like kind of like go, well, what's my differentiator that's allowing me to sell it at this price? Okay, so this is what I mean. This is the way in which we focus on pricing and ensuring that you can get prices that are going to add value to your clients. But this particular slide, I'm going to go through it again, because I really want you to understand the whole principle behind it, and also the perception that a client is going to have, because the pricing options is not just about what you think a product should be priced at. It's about what value a client gets from it. Because when the client perceives that the value is great, then they're more than likely to purchase the product than if they don't. So the three options again: total front loading. Now, total front loading, if you can do total front loading, I think this is the best way. Honestly, because it does give your customer peace of mind in a way, because they're like, once I've made this particular purchase, then that's it. I don't need to purchase anything else. Now, we're not going into this video where we're talking about how you take deposits and things like that, because that's a total different thing. That's aside from pricing. But this is that's a manner in the way in which you can break down the actual price points that they would then do. So, you know, you can go into service agreements, you can do all those kind of things. That's a total different story. I'm not going to explain that in this video. That will be a total different video that I'll do. However, but when we're looking at this total figure, if you can front load almost everything, then that's great. And some of the products that we have are priced in such a way that you can, like with the Ultrastrand Express, you really can front load it if, you know, the prices that we talked about previously are in line with the prices that you actually charge. Now, if you are charging your client less than the £60 per hour, then you can totally front load. Absolutely, totally front load. And if you're looking at other products, not Ultrastrands, and you look at your products and your services, look to see, can we front load everything so that the product price plus the maintenance is included into one, and it's all one price that the client will pay. If you can front load it, then the good thing about that is you're going to get your clients returning back. You don't have to ask them to come. They will be coming. And it's good when they come because you've got additional services that you'll be providing to them. So colors, cuts, all the other things. Because just because they're wearing, for instance, Ultrastrand doesn't mean that the other services go out of the window. They might not have to be done as often, but they're still in play. They're still in play. And when a client comes back, you know, every month they can have a curly blow dry. There's so much things that can be done when you totally front load everything. The next one is you partially front load. Now, again, partially front loading, what my recommendation is when you're partially front loading, at least in this instance, do it to the price of the recommended retail price. Now, if you have got a product where the recommended retail price does not cover, say, all your installation costs and so on and so forth, then I would add that in. So I would, because there's no point in trying to partially front load and you've got half of your installation price including the product and then half of it outside of the product if the differentiation is going to be too much. So, and the reason I'm saying that is if you partially front load and say you have a product and the cost price is £100. The recommended retail price is £150. Okay. But for you to install it, it's going to cost you £200, say, for instance. If you then have the recommended retail price, you've got the £100 plus £50, it's £150. That's the recommended retail price. So therefore, your installation is now only going to be £150, right? If you have the £150, say, so now installation price is £150, then you really need to maintain that as your price consistently. So anytime they're having an installation price, anything installed, it's £150. So if that is justifiable, then that's great, that's fine. If not, you would need to add that into your front load. The other example is if, for example, you've got your installation price is, say, £200, your cost price is £100, but the recommended retail price is £250. Is £150. And then that gives you a residual amount of, say, £50. What you don't want to do is say to people that my installation price is £50, because if your installation price is £50, then it has to be £50 across the board. So you need to be very careful. I will always do it in blocks. I would always say, if I'm doing the recommended retail price, if I'm doing if I'm front loading, try as much as possible to put in the installation price. The installation price as part of your front loading, as part of your partial front load, because then at least you can say to your client, that includes your installation price. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? So that's the only scenario where you would have your front loading equal to your cost price plus your installation as opposed to your margin, because your margin might not be large enough, which is why I say the margins are important. In the case of ultra strands, the margin is sufficient because you're getting £240 worth of margin now. And if you had to add an extra £50 onto there, then that's not going to be here or there. What you don't really want to be doing is adding another £250, another £300 into that, because the price point is going to go so high that it really doesn't make sense. So the value comes down. So it's always a balancing act, because if your price is too high, then the value is reduced. So you have to make it so that you don't have a too low a price, which means that you're making a disservice to yourself. And essentially the value expectation of your client is looking at an overvalued expectation over an undervalued product. That's not going to work. So you have to have it balanced out in such a way that actually it's either the product is per the value expected, or the product price and the value price are comparable. So it means that when a client says, oh my gosh, I've got so much value, you are not devaluing the product itself. Because when you start to devalue the product, then you run into problems. You run into big issues that you can't rectify. So in this case, where I'm looking at partial front loading, at the maximum, most scenarios, you want to include the cost price plus the margin. In scenarios where your margins are lower than, say, your installation price, for instance, then just increase that front loading option to the price of your installation, but not to the extent if your installation is too much. I would rather you just take out the price of the installation and then have that separate, because then you're not losing value in that sense. Do you understand what I mean? You're not losing value in that sense, because if you add it on and you're saying, let me give you an example, just so that it's clear. So say, for example, like I said, my installation was, I don't know, £500. I was going to do the installation for 500. I cannot add 400 plus 240 plus 360 onto my price, because I'm coming off roughly about £900, and that's just like installation. That's just the product plus the installation. Now, you could get away with that if you've got clients that are in that bracket, but if you're looking at Joe Bug clients that are not in that bracket, they're going to not think that that's added value. Whereas if you have the product price in and you go, okay, the product price is £640, but to get it installed, because of the things that we need to do from an installation price, that's going to cost you £340. They would understand that, because you have given the installation its own separate value aside from the product. So marrying the two is very, very important. And again, we've got then the backloading, which I don't recommend, but it's a possibility to use. I don't recommend backloading, but if you're doing that, you're really undervaluing the price of the cost, the price of the product, and you don't need to. But definitely in that scenario, then the maintenance is going to be separate. And then you've also got to be careful, because if you've got a cost price of £400 and you've got an installation price of, I don't know, 240, that's that's kind of almost like a huge pill to swallow sometimes, because they're like, well, it's going to cost me almost the same amount to install it as it is to get the product. Do you understand what I mean? It's all about how people think. And when people don't think they're getting value, then they're not getting value. It's about their perception. If they don't feel they're getting value, they're not getting value. It doesn't matter what you say and what you do, they're not getting value. And I will want to say to you is that all these options that I'm talking about, we've trialed them and we've tested them. And we know the backloading just causes more aggro, more hassle, because it has done. You know, because nobody's going to thank you for for putting the price lower, because they will think that that's the value of the product. They will think that's the value of the product. And if they go tick in the box, that's it. They're not going to go, well, actually, it was only £400, because they're still expensive products. It's not like they're spending £10 or £20. They're not going to say it's only £400. They will say, I paid £400 for that, and I expect £400 worth of the product. So, and that's one of the reasons as to why be careful if you're backloading. Partial front loaded, that's great, but I would always say that also depends on the margin that's in there. If you've got a sufficient margin, then that's great, because then you can actually charge the recommended retail price, but you've got your value, you've got element of your installation in there. Front loading is the most optimal if you can possibly do that. That's front loading the whole lot, and literally they pay once, and that includes the maintenance for the period, the duration of the product life cycle, whether that is 6 months or a year. And if that's possible to do, then that's great. So those are the 3 price options. Choose either 1 or 2. Please don't try and choose 3, because it really is going to cause you more havoc and more headache. But that's it. That is essentially it. And I think the more you are able to do something in this manner, the better it's going to be. The better it's going to be, because pricing is very important, and it's important that you price things properly the way they're supposed to be. If you go down, you know, a different route and you put a finger in the air, then, you know, it's just going to cause all sorts of issues. So if you've got any questions, please do ask them. I'm here to answer them. I've got probably I've got 4 minutes on the clock, so I can ask any questions. One question that came up beforehand was about, when we're looking at pricing options, do we have to do them differently per product? And I would say, like, maintenance is pretty much going to be standard across the board. I don't think it takes that much, you know, much extra time or less time to do any of the volumizer sizes, apart from the full head. If you're doing a full head volumizer, I probably would have that separated out. But for the rest of them, the maintenance is pretty much the same. The other thing where I would say is different will just be the cost of the product. So the cost of the product, I believe that if you're looking at Ultratrans, for instance, the margins are pretty much the same across the board. So I would say the installation price more reflects how long it's going to take for you to do that installation, whereas the maintenance, from a monthly point of view, is not really going to change that much, if that makes sense. And I probably have totally confused you all. I hope I haven't, but I'll repeat that again. I don't know. Monday is always one of these days where you really got to think. I'm just really trying to think of all these things. And when I'm looking at figures, it's hard to calculate figures and talk about them at the same time. But essentially, just in case you didn't get that, what I was saying is, when you're looking at the product price itself, the product price and the margins in there, especially when you're looking at Ultratrans, is reflective of the amount of time it's going to take for you to do the installation plus the consultation. When you're looking at the maintenance, for most of them, you're going to have the same kind of costs, apart from if you're doing a full head, because a full head is more than likely going to take you a lot longer. So you really need to have, I would say, a separate calculation for that. But for the rest, you should be fine with the with just doing it exactly the same. I hope that makes sense. So that's pretty much it. And I hope that you've been able to get some value from this. Like I said, if you've got any questions, just post them up in the comments. Even if you don't post them up now, if you're watching at a later point, post them up at that point. All things will make sense as you start to work with the product. But essentially, you can use it for any products. Although I'm talking about Ultratrans, you can use this across the board. So anything that you're doing, and you need to kind of look at, how do I calculate the price on this? Especially if it's a product combined with a maintenance that's attached together. So hair extensions, anything in that way, any other type of hair loss scenarios that you're doing, even colors, you know, there's all these things that you can do, and you can package it up in a particular way. This formula will work for you. But like I said, if you try it and you've got any questions, if you want me to, you know, run through anything again, then do let me know, because it's important that you get the pricing right. We have got our recommended prices in our Ultratrans members group. So if you're an approved technician, then you'll already know what our trade prices are, and you'll also know what the recommended price is as well to your customers. So yeah, so you don't really need to do that much calculation. But Anyway, if you're not and you're looking to come on board, then you know what to do. Just go to our website, www.ultratrans.com, and check us out there and see whether we can help you help somebody else and make a difference in your world and a difference in somebody else's world as well, because that's what we're all about, making a difference in the world, our world, and the world around us. Anyway, I've talked way too much. I've run out of time. Any questions, do give me a shout. Until next week, this has been me, Clara Alexander, talking to you, whoever you are, hoping that you have an awesome Monday. Take care. Bye-bye.